Hi, this is Kogito, and I'm back with another Through the Ages video. So in this video, as you can tell from the title, I'm going to be covering my most recent French Open game, but before that I'd like to talk a little bit about my World Championship group, because as you may know, I've been uploading videos of my World Championship Round 2 games to this channel. If you haven't seen them, you can go back and watch if you're interested. But I'm not going to cover the last 2 games I played in my group. And that's for a couple of reasons, but the major reason is, as you can see, both of those last 2 games ended with my opponent resigning. One of them, my Cleveman, I believe, resigned towards the beginning of Age 3. Fatop resigned more at the end of Age 3. So obviously there's still stuff of interest to cover in both of these games, but I felt it might be better to just go over some of the other games I've played that, finished, that there's more to discuss in. So I will, you can say I ended up going undefeated in my World Championship group, which is nice, but I'll talk more about this when I make my first video for the next round of my World Championship run. So you can look forward to that, but I just wanted to sort of state right here that, that I'm not going to be making more videos for round 2. Anyway, though, this video is about the French Open, so let's talk about the French Open. The French Open, Through the Ages tournament, is a pretty interesting one. It just started, Sylvain created it last year, so it's the first tournament I've played in that's default asynced, meaning that each turn you have 24 hours and 3 days of reserve per age, so that's significantly more time than you normally get in tournaments. The idea being, just to, because it's a long-running tournament, as we'll discuss in a bit, Sylvain said they just wanted to give people more time on it. So as for the format of the French Open, it's sort of, how should I put it? It's sort of like a soccer league, kind of, in that the idea is you have the 80 players, and the 80 players will just play a series of 4-player games for 11 rounds, and the idea is, I believe you get 4 points from winning, or is it 3 points? I'm not sure. But basically, you get a certain number of points for getting first, and less for getting second and third, and least for getting fourth, obviously. And then, based on the amount of points you have, and then the following round, you'll play against the opponents at a similar point level. So the four players with the highest points will play each other, followed by the 4 players followed by players 5 through 8 in terms of points, and then so on and so forth. And then by the end of the 11th round, whoever has the total number of points will be declared the winner. So it's sort of like a long-running league system where each game matters, but you're not ruined. If you get 4th in one game, you can still come back. So I think it's a pretty interesting format, and I do appreciate that it's a very long time reserve, so you don't feel too pressured to play immediately. I've been enjoying it so far. I'm going to be covering my most recent game, which was, I think, round 7, I believe, or round 8. I haven't been keeping track. It's the round based off of this one. So you can see that currently in the French Open, I am 9th place out of 80 players, which is not bad, but not fantastic. That means I just missed the cutoff of playing this 5 through 8 segment. So my opponents in this game will be pv4, Phalanxx, and GerionLannister. So with that in mind, we can also take a look at the Glico ratings for all of those players. pv4 is, as you probably know if you're watching this video, is one of the best Through the Ages players in the world. They are currently ranked 11 in terms of Glico rating, but 2nd on the leaderboard. And they, have a much higher rating than I do, so they're definitely my toughest opponent in this game. Phalanxx and GerionLannister, while they are lower ranked than me, are certainly no slouches. Phalanxx is in the top 100, GerionLannister is just outside of it. So while, you could say that, pv4 should win and I should come in 2nd, obviously just with one game, all of these are strong opponents, very much including Phalanxx and GerionLannister, so it should be a difficult and interesting game. Without further ado, let's take a look. I'm playing first in this game. We can take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. What most jumps out to me in Age 3 is there's a lot of science synergy with Bill Gates, Albert Einstein, Sid Meier, and Marie Curie all helping with their science, as well as a spaceflight wonder as a payoff, and a Manhattan Project wonder. So lots of science in this deck. There's also Churchill plus Manhattan Project for some potential aggressive strategies, with no Gandhi either, notably. There's also Pierre in the game, no internet, but Pierre is always worth paying attention to. There's also Marlena, always worth paying attention to, albeit no Hollywood, and again, no internet. In age 2, we can see that we have Newton to potentially transition into these science leaders, as well as Darwin, perhaps. There's 1 military action leader in Catherine. 2 culture leaders in age 4, somewhat less relevant, but still... Sorry, in 4 players, somewhat less relevant, but always good to pay attention to. Perhaps most notably, there is the James Cook-Suez Canal combo, so that needs to be kept in mind, as well as our Harvard College for those science synergies. So right now, it's looking like the 2 major strategies might be a science-based strategy or a colonization-based strategy with Cook-Suez, and potentially a military strategy with the Churchill-Manhattan Project payoff. In age 1, we can see that most of these leaders prefer to be elected later in the age, although it kind of depends. Isabella is fine being elected early, as is Leonardo, obviously. Nostradamus, you know, can be good to elect early if the event deck's moving quickly. The other leaders, maybe not as much, but still, you know, maybe roughly balanced in terms of leaders who want to be elected early versus elected late. As for the wonders in age 1, they're mostly... They're all right, you know, they're not the best that they could be, but they're not terrible either. The age 2 wonders are also about the same. We have Harvard College and Suez as the main power wonders. So I would say the wonder deck here is pretty good, but not great. As for me, I think my major decision here is Sun Tzu versus Roman roads, or Stonehenge perhaps, but Roman roads is probably a bit better than Stonehenge. I would say that in a vacuum, Roman roads is probably a stronger card than Sun Tzu, but I think there are a few considerations here that cause me to take Sun Tzu. One consideration is there's a fair amount of Sun Tzu synergy. Most obviously is the Suez Canal synergy. I was definitely looking forward to this. There's also Isabella to help with the colonization strategy, as well as Frederick Barbarossa in age 1. As for the age 1 synergy with Sun Tzu, there's no Jan Zizka, but there is Genghis Khan and Barbarossa, both of whom can synergize with them well. So I thought there was a pretty good amount of Sun Tzu synergy. I'm also playing first in this game, notably, which makes a military-focused strategy more powerful. But the major reason I think I decided to take Sun Tzu is because of the leader situation, where I figured if I didn't take him, you know, one of my opponents is definitely going to take Hammurabi. If I didn't take Sun Tzu, I figured one of my opponents would almost certainly take him as well, which means that potentially on my next turn, if I don't take a leader, I will very likely not be able to take a leader for 1 civil action. And even the leaders available for 2 civil actions would be Hippocrates and Moses, who I think are possibly the worst AJ leaders, maybe along with Caesar. So that wasn't very exciting to me. I could maybe hope for Confucius, mainly Confucius. Aristotle, Cleopatra would also be alright, but like Aristotle and Cleopatra I think would be worse than Sun Tzu as well. Confucius would probably be better, but he might not even come out. Even if he does, he would only be available for 3 civil actions. That just felt really risky to wait for a leader, because again, like if I don't take Sun Tzu here, I'd probably just end up taking one of these leaders for 2 civil actions, which felt really bad. So that's why I felt that it was more important to get my leader instead of my wonder. We can see there are 4 good wonders on the row. I think because of Suez, James Cook, this is also a powerful game for Colossus. So I think all 4 of these wonders could be good as well. So I should be able to get a good wonder no matter what, whereas this is maybe my only chance to get a good leader for cheap. GerionLannister takes the Roman roads in an urban growth, which seems good. But that does however leave Phalanxx with the Hammurabi Stonehenge combo, which I think is quite strong. PV4 on the other hand takes the library and the stockpile, values the library over the Colossus, which does make sense. Age 1 begins, and I'm left with something of an interesting decision, after of course electing my leader and building a mine. My choice here I think comes down to which of these wonders that I want. I think Pyramids is more powerful in a vacuum. However, there are also a few considerations for Colossus. First of all, it's available for 1 civil action cheaper. Now, you know, you could make up for that civil action deficit with the Pyramids eventually. In addition, not having an open population on turn 3 is least bad on your first player, because there's only going to be 1 development seeded probably, so that there's going to be between 0 and 1 development seeded unless you're Caesar, which means the chances are lower that development of warfare or religion will be revealed. So I think it would be fine to take the Pyramids for 2 civil actions here. It would be very defensible. I did end up going for the Colossus though. Partly it was, like I said, just that it's available for cheaper right now. But I also, again, first of all, you know, as said previously, there's good Colossus energy here with Suez, James Cook. And in addition, I already took Sun Tzu and I'm playing first. So I felt that with me having a military leader already and me being first, getting Colossus alongside that might enable me to put a lot of pressure on my opponents. I will also say, I think, like, pushing military hard, especially early, is the strategy I might have the least amount of experience with. So part of it might also have been wanting to sort of test out, you know, doing a heavily military-focused strategy like this to sort of see how it went and see, you know, get more experience doing this sort of thing. So the cards I draw are a Pestilence, a Dark Ages, a Rebellion, and a Medieval Army. GerionLannister values Hammurabi, values Hippocrates over Moses. I think that makes sense. And otherwise does normal stuff. Builds a mine, increase the population. Phalanxx also builds a mine and increases the population and chooses to take the engineering genius for 2 civil actions with Hammurabi. I think that makes a lot of sense. But that does leave pv4 with Confucius for 1 civil action. I mean, there's nothing Phalanxx could do about this, but it means that pv4 is able to get a strong leader wonder combo. So that's definitely good for pv4. It's my turn. I do want to seed because, you know, I have Sun Tzu Colossus. I want to get the event deck moving as fast as possible. The question is, and as for which cards to seed, I think it was pretty straightforward to seed the Dark Ages. Pestilence, I didn't want to seed. I felt that losing a population might make it harder for me to really push military against my opponents. Rebellion, you know, I don't have a Happy Face Winder, whereas Phalanx does. GerionLannister has the Roman Road, so it felt like Pestilence would probably... felt like Rebellion would be bad for me because I don't have a Happy Face Winder. Pestilence, you know, might be alright to seed, but, you know, Lannister does have an extra yellow token and stuff, and I wanted to have population for my military. Whereas, as for the Dark Ages, you know, I know it's in the deck, so I'll be able to play around it. It might hit PV4 pretty hard, because PV4 is going to be getting a lot of science income, as is Phalanx with the Stonehenge, so it just felt like the most damaging, the best event for me relative to my opponents. The development I revealed was politics, so I have a lot of cards that I've drawn so far. I drew a heavy cavalry, a legion, and a border conflict. Talk a little bit about this at the end of my turn. As for my turn itself, after building my lab, which I think is pretty straightforward, I mean, I didn't have to. I could have kept the open population for developments, potentially. But, I preferred building the lab this turn, especially because of the turn I'm going to take next. So, aside from building the lab, or, you know, maybe I could have built a stage of the Colossus instead, that either way, I would have had 3 civil actions left. One of the civil actions could be used to increase my population. That would put me in consumption, though, especially with me wanting to push military. I didn't really want to do that if I didn't have to. One option could have been to increase my population and take one of these cards for 2 civil actions. I think the Warfare would have been the best card to take, especially when you have Colossus. You kind of really want a 3rd military action before Age 1 ends, so that when you draw your military cards off of Colossus, you don't have to discard, like, your entire hand down to 2. So I think taking Warfare and increasing my population would definitely be quite defensible. However, instead I decided to take this Iron for 3 civil actions. Normally I don't like taking cards for 3 civil actions this early. In this situation, however, like, especially, you know, when you're playing first, oftentimes there's not that many cards revealed. The cards available on the 1 civil action row are all pretty bad, aside from Pyramids, which I can't take. So I'm not really wasting that many civil actions by taking the Iron, if you think about it, because the civil actions I'm spending would have been spent on low-value yellow cards instead. I do think, again, taking the Warfare and increasing my population could be defended, but this early Iron felt pretty strong for me, especially with me building the 2nd lab along with it. If any science development gets revealed, including the development of civil life, I'll be able to start upgrading my Iron Mines next turn. Getting such an early Iron felt pretty powerful for me. Like I said, the wonders in the deck aren't the best, but they're pretty good, so an early Iron does seem pretty strong. And it just seemed like a way to snowball my position much more than a Warfare would. Like I said, if a science development is revealed before my next turn, which I think is more likely than not, I didn't do the odds or anything. I mean, it depends on whether my opponent seed, but PV4 at the very least will seed and I'm going to seed. So that's at least 2 seeds that are going to come. And if a science event is revealed, being able to upgrade an Iron next turn, I think is a lot stronger than, like, playing an early Warfare would be. That would just, like, draw and let me keep an extra card when the event deck hasn't flipped yet. So I just thought that getting the iron earlier was more important for me than getting warfare earlier. And I was willing to spend a lot of civil actions on it for this reason. I think the Code of Laws could also potentially be defended here, but I'm not sure if I'll necessarily have the science to support the Code of Laws, since I'll want to upgrade buildings soon too. I think even though this is an extreme play, looking at it again, I don't think it was wrong. Mainly because, again, the alternatives aren't that great. And the potential of getting an early snowball going next turn. As for my cards, first of all, I did want to play one of these tactic cards. Obviously, with Sun Tzu, they won't become public until I replace Sun Tzu. So that encourages you to play one of them. The question is which one. I think drawing this heavy cavalry tactic was nice because, again, there's Genghis Khan in the deck. So being able to upgrade your heavy cavalry with Genghis Khan can be very powerful. Your opponents are likely not to be able to copy your upgraded tactic. So I did want to keep my heavy cavalry around, but I also didn't want to play it this turn because I didn't want to encourage one of my opponents to take Genghis should he be variable. So for that reason, I wanted to play one of the other tactics. Again, you know, just in case maybe like I don't get Genghis or whatever, I would want to upgrade a different tactic. And I decided to go ahead and play the medieval army just because whichever one I don't play will be discarded because I want to keep the heavy cavalry and I want to keep an Aventicide. And the medieval army is just a generally stronger tactic to upgrade than the Legion. So that's why I played that one. And as for Kaz, like I said, I wanted to keep the heavy cavalry in case I get Genghis. And for reasons already stated, the Pestilence and the Rebellion didn't seem very strong to me, whereas the Border Conflict does seem potentially quite strong because I am in such a good position to potentially be strongest. So I think it's pretty clear to keep the Border Conflict here. And I draw a Raid, a Knowledge of the Ancients, and another Heavy Cavalry. But at least this will probably make it very unlikely that one of my opponents would take Genghis. Gerion Seeds reveals the development of agriculture. Gerion takes a rich land and a bread and circuses, and then plays the urban growth. Early bread and circuses, there is Pierre in the deck, so I think it's definitely defensible, even though, you know, taking a card for 2 civil actions that you probably won't play for a long time isn't normally something you want to do. But maybe Gerion preferred that to the alternatives. Maybe Warfare would have been slightly better, but I think it is debatable. And Gerion plays their own medieval army. Phalanx offers a traders agreement that's kind of an interesting decision. I think where Phalanx wants to use food as rocks, whereas I can use rocks as food. I think this is a potentially strong pact for Phalanx. We'll even see this turn that Phalanx is able to make good use out of it. But I also think with me getting such an early iron potentially, and with me wanting to get more population to put into the military, being able to use rocks as food seemed potentially quite useful for me as well. So it felt like kind of a win-win pact for me. Which is presumably why Phalanx offered it to me and not one of the other opponents. Anyway, Phalanx ends up taking the Warfare and the Code of Laws. So 2 blue... and then we can see Phalanx is able to now be very efficient with their civil actions after this by building a lab and then using a food to build the first step of the Stonehenge. So pack definitely coming in useful for Phalanx this turn. Taking both of these is often too much of a science drain, but because Phalanx has the Stonehenge, they should be able to afford it relatively easily. And they play a Fighting Band to keep the other 2 cards on their hand. pv4 Seeds, unsurprisingly, reveals the development of settlements. Unfortunately, oh yeah, so Gerion also seeded. So neither of these developments revealed thus far are science ones, unfortunately. But I will get one last chance on my turn. pv4 is able to take the second copy of Code of Laws, so I won't be able to get Code of Laws in this game. And otherwise, they just are efficient, spend their civil actions efficiently. As my turn, I definitely wanted to seed, both because I want to get the event deck moving with my military potential, and because I want the Border Conflict in the deck for the same reason, and because I really want a science development to be revealed. There's multiple strong reasons for me to seed this turn, and thankfully I do reveal basically a science development, at least in this context it is. The development of civil life lets me play the iron for 4 science, and then get an upgrade in immediately, so I definitely wanted to do that to get these going. The question again is what else to do with my turn? Well, aside from increasing my population, which I have to do in order to get out of corruption. Now, this is also kind of a tricky turn because after doing this, none of the cards on the row that I can take are particularly exciting. There is, of course, drama synergy with Bach and Marlena, so that could definitely be defended to increase my population and take the drama. I think that would be a defensible line. Maybe the patriotism too, although I, maybe don't need rocks that much, but, it's never bad. Printing press, probably not. There's not really. I mean, there's Leonardo, so there's a little bit, and Shakespeare, and Darwin, so actually there's a fair amount of printing press synergy. So I think that increasing my population and taking one of these 2 buildings could certainly be defended. However, on the other hand, because my plan right now is to push military hard, putting a lot of resources into these urban buildings didn't seem in line with that strategy. Now, of course, I could just take the drama this turn and then just hold it in my hand for a while, planning for Bach, but that doesn't feel great. It's also hard to guarantee that you'll be able to aim for a particular leader in a 4-player game. So I decided instead to take this breakthrough for 2 civil actions. I think breakthrough for 1 civil action is a fantastic card. For 2 civil actions, it's more like, okay. So it's not a super exciting card for me to take for 2 civil actions. However, it is true that right now it's looking like I might need a little bit of science. I mean, there hasn't been any science developments revealed yet other than development of civil life. So it's possible it might be a little bit of a low science game. I am going to be discarding... No, I won't be discarding the Knowledge of the Ancients yet, so maybe I could plan to seed Knowledge of the Ancients to get a little bit of extra science. But, again, I just felt that, while taking one of these buildings would be fine, it didn't feel in line with my current strategy, and it would probably be a very long time, if ever, before I played them. So instead, taking this breakthrough, which, I will definitely be able to use, maybe not immediately, maybe because I see the Dark Ages too, that militates against taking the breakthrough, because I know there's Dark Ages in the deck, I probably won't want to use this on the next technology I play, so it might also be a little while before I can use the breakthrough too, so that's maybe a reason to take one of these, being a little more civil action efficient. That's not really something I considered at the time. I think it's a pretty close decision, but, yeah, in this situation, I mean... Printing press is good with Leonardo. I'm kind of aiming for Genghis Khan, but I don't have to. It's also good with Darwin. Shakespeare would probably be difficult to get going in a 4-player game. But there's definitely, with Bach and Marlena, you can make an argument for dramas too, even though there's no Hollywood. Yeah, I think it's a close decision. But I think maybe in retrospect, I should have been more efficient with my civil actions. Especially because earlier I took that iron for 3 civil actions. Like, when you do something like that, you kind of have to be careful about your civil actions more in the future. So maybe that was a reason to save on these civil actions and, just take the drama as like a, maybe I won't use it, but just in case, mainly just to get that extra pop in this turn. Anyway, I draw a historic territory, a barbarians, and 2 bonus cards. Gerion takes the swordsman and builds a stage of the Roman roads. I think that's a reasonable play, obviously, especially, needing to respond to my strength potential. Phalanxx takes the monarchy, always a great card to have with Hammurabi, because you can do a revolution easily, and then finishes the Stonehenge and increases the population, presumably preparing for a revolution next turn. pv4 Seas reveals his development of religion. pv4 builds the warriors and a stage of the library, then plays the stockpile, increases the population, and then takes the warfare for 2 civil actions. Probably again, maybe just preparing for a strength push that I might do soon, so I think that makes sense. On my turn, though, I have a little bit of an interesting decision. At least after, well, first, obviously, I didn't want to seed barbarians because it was looking like there was a good chance I would be the culture leader. Whereas I already have 2 bonus cards. I have the Colossus, so there seemed like pretty good odds that I would be able to win the historic territory, which also plays into my colonization strategy. I reveal development of warfare. Okay, so I did do this first. This is kind of an interesting turn. First, let's talk a bit about Genghis Khan. Obviously, you know, I was kind of planning on taking him when I'm able to upgrade the heavy cavalry. However, because I've already drawn the second copy of heavy cavalry, it's kind of feels bad to take him now for 3 civil actions when I would almost certainly, I know, it would be very likely I would be able to get them for 1 civil action next turn. My opponents are probably not going to take him. Though you never know for sure. However, there were a couple reasons I decided to take him this turn. One reason is because I didn't necessarily see a much better use of my civil actions, so I could potentially upgrade a mine and increase my population, but then I have 2 left. I could take, you know, I could maybe take Isabella and the Breton and the Theology. That's definitely a possibility. Isabella also works well with my colonization strategy. Now, unfortunately, I have a bit of an issue there with which tactic I might upgrade. Right now I only have cavalry tactics, and no copies of knights have appeared yet. Now, I might be able, you know, I will likely be able to get one of them at some point, but I don't know when. So it is a little awkward to replace Sun Tzu when I don't have a knights yet. Well, with someone other than Genghis Khan, obviously. Now, I could just take Isabella and not play her, for instance. And obviously, like, having the Theology in my hand is nice. I mean, I might, especially with the historic territory in the deck, maybe I expect to win that, especially since I got these 2 bonus cards. So, maybe I won't need the Theology, probably, if I have the 2 happy faces from the colony and from the temple. So that's the reason not to take one of these. But it can't be bad to have, and it would certainly be more civil action efficient than taking Genghis here for 3. Eleanor I probably wouldn't take for 2. So I do think the major alternative to this play would be increasing my population, upgrading a mine, and then taking Isabella and the Theology. However, by taking Genghis Khan this turn, I am able to play him this turn, because I can now play the heavy cavalry to upgrade it, and then I am able to build a 3rd warrior. Now, this doesn't mean that I am not upgrading my mine this turn, but there are a few major benefits to it too. First of all, it all but guarantees I will be the strongest for this turn cycle, meaning that it makes it more likely that I'll be able to win the border conflict that I seeded into the deck, which would be equivalent to a lot more than 1 early mine upgrade, because it would be worth 3 rocks and not 1. So that's one reason I did that. But another reason is obviously I'm putting a lot of pressure on my opponents. Immediately going from 2 strength, which I had before this turn, to 8 is a huge leap that I think my opponents were not necessarily preparing for. And so by doing this, you know, my opponents might have to put a lot of effort into defending themselves, whereas I didn't really put that much into getting this amount of strength in the first place. And while it is true that Genghis would probably be available for 1 civil action next turn, I don't know that for a certainty. So in order to guarantee that I get Genghis, who I do think is the strongest Age 1 leader for me, with me being able to use the upgraded heavy cavalry, and the fact that the alternative of potentially taking Isabella and Theology, while I think it would be fine, it's not super exciting either, necessarily. You know, I mean, if I took Isabella instead, then I wouldn't take Genghis next turn anyway, so maybe I could take, like, Theology, Cultural Heritage, but that feels pretty awkward. Cultural Heritage, you know, not a great yellow card to take when you're only on 4 civil actions, so I think even though this is a weird-looking turn, I think we'll see what my opponents have to do to respond to my strength push, and I think that will mean that my strength push was correct to do. So I actually think I backed this turn, even in retrospect. Anyway, as for discards, I unfortunately do end up discarding both my events in the hand. Now, especially with me having Genghis Khan, it does look very likely I'll be the culture leader, so I don't want to seed barbarians. No, Knowledge of the Ancients would be nice, but, you know, it would be like a roughly equivalent event, so I didn't feel too bad discarding it, just to make sure I keep these bonus cards in my hand when I already know I've seeded a colony. So Gerion, we can see, decides in order to defend, they have to take a knights for 3 civil actions, and then build a knights. So that does enable them to defend, but obviously, you know, taking this knights for 3 civil actions instead of maybe doing something else to help their civilization. In particular, I think Isabella would have been a great leader for GerionLannister this turn, because they've gotten their full Hippocrates value. So my strength push kind of forced GerionLannister to not replace their leader this turn. So we can see I already got some value out of doing that. As for Phalanx, they end up, in order to be able to defend against me, do a monarchy revolution and then play a warfare with their Hammurabi action, which does guarantee the defense, but unfortunately it means that they will be in corruption. Now they would have, looks like would have been in corruption anyway. They didn't really have a way to spend that resources, but maybe my doing that encouraged Phalanx to do this revolution instead of some other turn that maybe, I guess they didn't. Yeah, because they didn't necessarily have to play the warfare this turn. They could have maybe upgraded irons or something, but they felt the need to do this instead. I think probably because of my strength push. So costing them corruption definitely felt nice. And as for pv4, after seeding and revealing that border conflict, thankfully, so pv4 decides to lose a mine to the border conflict, and then after taking Isabella to compensate for that mine loss, and playing the warfare. Right, so by playing the warfare, they are able to guarantee defense against me and building this. I guess they just play the tactic. Yeah, I think probably pv4 felt like they couldn't rebuild, they couldn't like destroy a mine and rebuild it because they needed to have an open population in case I finish the Colossus this turn, which I will be, spoilers. So we can see that especially GerionLannister and Phalanx had to kinda do inefficient turns. You know, GerionLannister took knights for 3 civil actions, Phalanx did corruption. pv4 was able to defend themselves relatively easily, so they were able to do it the best, but they still, you know, ended up losing a mine, even though they got compensation for it with Isabella. So I think that even though mine was an inefficient turn, it forced my opponents into awkward turns. So I think it was worthwhile to do. As for me, I can't seed. I decided I could have upgraded 2 of my mines, but instead I decided to finish my Colossus. There's a couple reasons for this. First of all, it obviously puts even more strength pressure on my opponents, potentially forcing them into more suboptimal turns. Second of all, it gives me a colonization bonus in case someone seeds and reveals the historic territory. But third of all, it allows me to take Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu, not the best Age 1 Wonder, but I did want to have an Age 1 Wonder so that I could spend my rocks on something, you know. Even though I'm kind of delaying my mine upgrades now for a little bit, I still got at least that 1 mine upgrade pretty early. So I'm gonna still be having a fair amount of rocks, especially with me having won the border conflict. So I wanted to have a rock sink available to me to make sure I don't go into corruption. I probably would have preferred to take the Universitas, but the Universitas obviously isn't on the row right now. I don't know if I would be able to take it. You know, one of my opponents could definitely very easily take it instead. Whereas the Machu Picchu is available right now, I know I'll be able to have it. While I don't have the irrigation right now, no one else does, because the irrigation is going to be late. Chances felt lower that 2 of my opponents, it seems pretty unlikely that 2 of my opponents would take the irrigations, so I should be able to get 1 copy of irrigation at some point. And also, you don't necessarily need irrigation. Machu Picchu mainly wants irons. Irrigations will obviously make it a lot better, but I don't think it's a necessity to make it worth taking. And I also wanted to do this play instead of upgrading my irons, because if I upgraded my irons, I didn't really like anything else I could do. I could probably just take the alchemy. But taking an alchemy here for 2 civil actions, I mean, I could be able to upgrade them next turn, but probably, so if I upgraded my 2 mines instead, next turn I would still want to finish my Colossus, so I wouldn't be playing the alchemies until 2 turns from now, potentially, if not later. And so taking a card for 2 civil actions and not planning to play it for at least 2 turns didn't feel great, especially since this is just the first copy of alchemy. So if I don't take it, there seems to be at least a pretty good chance that I'll be able to get a copy for 1 civil action later if I decide I want to. So for that reason, I felt that being able to take the Machu Picchu for 2 civil actions here is just a better, is better than taking this alchemy for 2 civil actions, which would have been the other major alternative. I could have maybe taken the swordsman for 2 civil actions too, but it didn't feel necessary. I have so much strength. I should be able to at least compete for strength leader throughout the first half or so of H2, even without any military technologies whatsoever. So when you're in a situation like this, I think skipping the Age 1 military techs and aiming just to be on H2 military techs can be very strong, because obviously the H2 military techs work for H3 tactics, so it just, you know, it means that you can skip the you can skip the H1 military tech entirely, which you can't use with H3 tactics. So I think that's always something good to get if you can. I draw a rat, so at least it's an event seed and a bonus card. Gerion Seeds reveals a Confucius event. Gerion decides to take Barbarossa to help with their military a little bit, even though they don't have any farm income. Takes the first copy of Alchemy, uses Barbarossa to get up to 10 strength, and builds 2 stages of the Roman roads. Definitely defensible line. Phalanxx decides to take Leonardo, that they can get along with the Alchemy, so that's pretty strong. Phalanxx can build a warrior to go up to 5 strength, technically not guaranteed to defend, but they only need 1 defense card too. Also, I don't have an aggression. Anyway. And they take a swordsman to get some more strength in the future, as well as an urban growth. They take the urban growth instead of the iron, but it is true that they'll probably be working on alchemies first regardless, so they're probably aiming to go on coal. Leonardo does make it much easier to go on coal, so I think that's defensible, even though it's a little bit of an expensive price to pay for an urban growth. pv4 finishes the Library of Alexandria, builds another warrior to protect against my strength push, and decides to take the Silk Road instead of the Universitas. So it turns out I could have had the Universitas next turn if I hadn't taken the Machu Picchu. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. pv4, maybe pv4 took, maybe if I hadn't had the Machu Picchu, pv4 would have taken the Universitas to deny it from me as well, possibly. So, yeah, I still think it's... Anyway, moving on. I see the rats, you know, I'm strongest this turn, so I want to siege, and also due to my Treacherous Pact, I should be able to manipulate my food enough that I can avoid it, since I know it's coming. I reveal another Confucius event. With this Confucius events revealed and the breakthrough in my hand, I felt like I had enough science to justify this cartography. I think it's very good for me. Obviously, I have that historic territory in my hand, and I also would... if my opponents have ceded territories, or if I draw any more, it will help me win them. Again, I'm aiming for Suez Canal this game. Another reason, perhaps, not to take the Machu Picchu is if I'm aiming for Suez Canal, that might be a little, you know, I might hit the point of diminishing returns for rock income if I have both Machu Picchu and Suez Canal. On the other hand, I think it's pretty hard to hit that point of diminishing returns for rock income specifically. I feel like there's almost always more you can spend your rocks on, and also obviously it's a 4-player game. I can't know for sure I'll get the Suez Canal, but that is maybe that perhaps was a reason to militate against taking the Machu Picchu. Anyway, though, like I said, I'm still aiming for the Suez Canal and a colonization game, but also playing the cartography this turn puts me 1 strike ahead of Gerion, meaning that if Gerion sees on their turn, I'll still be strongest for potential events that care about that. So for those 2 reasons, I wanted to play the cartography. And with my remaining civil actions, well, I upgraded 1 mine, but instead of upgrading my second, which I could have, I decided to increase my population. And the reason for that is, you'll notice when the age ends, I'll have, after increasing my population with the Traders Agreement, I'll have 3 food next turn. Meaning, if the age ends, which is, it definitely could, before my next turn, then I'll have to spend 4 food to increasing my population, and I'll be able to do that with the Traders Agreement and put myself at 0 food, meaning I'll be safe from the rats that I just seeded, which, you know, the event deck could certainly flip also after my next seed. So, even though this costs me a rock, you know, I'll probably, you know, have enough rocks with Machu Picchu anyway, so I felt that it was more important to do this to set me up to not have any food on my next turn. If I didn't use the Traders Agreement this turn, then I would not be able to get rid of all of my food next turn. I think that was probably, yeah, it was probably good to do. I mean, you know, passing up a mine upgrade is not something you necessarily want to do, but, because I'm gonna have so many rocks anyway with Machu Picchu, it should be fine. I draw Cultural Influence and a Fighting Band. Gerion does not Seed. Instead, they, after taking the Iron, upgrade 2 warriors to swordsmen in order to get stronger than me. It's definitely nice to attain strongest. On the other hand, delaying your economy in order to do that. I mean, they'll still have enough science for Iron next turn, so they're not delaying their economy too much. But it's still investing resources for an uncertain return, you know. It's important not to be weakest, but going from second strongest to strongest. I mean, obviously, it sometimes can make a difference, although the border conflict is already out of the deck. And they could have probably predicted, they probably thought that I was likely to have seeded strength events in the deck, so I can't understand it, but understand it even though they are sacrificing their economy in order to do it. Phalanx, takes a breakthrough, even though they play Leonardo because the age is going to end before the next turn. They don't play Alchemy yet. Instead, they upgrade all of their warriors to swordsmen, using up all of their military actions in age 1, and ensuring that they can defend against aggressions from me. And they decide to take the Universalis, Strong Wonder. Even though they don't have Iron, Leonardo will supplement their rocks. And they also take the reserves for 3 civil actions. Definitely a heavy price for the reserves, but they probably didn't value any of these cards that much, and there will be a direct potential use for the reserves. You'll notice next turn, if Phalanx plays the Alchemy, they will be at 9 rocks, and then with the reserves, they'll be at 11 rocks, which means with the Urban Growth, they will be able to upgrade 1 lab to an Alchemy, giving them +2 science with Leonardo, and still finish the Universalis, giving them a total of +4 science income next turn. So with the reserves being able to essentially let them either upgrade the Alchemy or finish the Universalis a turn earlier, I think it's definitely justified, even though they're spending a heavy civil action cost on it. pv4 offers Phalanx the Open Buddhist Agreement. Unfortunately, it wasn't offered to me, but I can understand why it wasn't. pv4 builds the first stage of the Silk Road so that they can use the Silk Road bonus with their rich land and upgrading a mine. They take another rich land to use the Silk Road bonus again next turn. And finally, increase the population. Looks like a good turn to me. They do pass up the Alchemy, notably. Presumably planning on getting scientific methods. And, you know, maybe they figure that after upgrading their mines, they're going to want to finish the Silk Road. So it would be a long time before they would start upgrading alchemies regardless. We see the age doesn't actually end on my turn. I do see the cultural influence. Even though I'm not strongest now, I'm at least second strongest, but mostly I wanted to get the colony out on my turn. Unfortunately, it was the immigration, which Phalanx is able to win. If the colony had been first instead of the immigration, I could have been in on it too, but unfortunately that wasn't the order. But it's also especially unfortunate timing because I ended up deciding to take the Theocracy here. So, Theocracy is definitely one of the more interesting cards in Through the Ages, I think. I'm still not entirely sure how to value it and when it's good. Normally, I think it's good when you have additional sources of civil actions. I would say, like, especially when you have 2 additional civil actions, that's when it starts becoming, like, a really attractive card. I have no additional sources of civil actions, which normally would make me not consider taking the Theocracy. However, I think there are a couple important reasons why the Theocracy is a strong card for me in my position. First of all, I do really want that extra military action for my Colossus, for reasons already stated. The 2 copies of Warfare were taken by other players, so this is my only chance to get a 3rd military action in age 1. Another reason is that the other benefits of Theocracy too, I think, will be very helpful for me right now. The strength will allow me to tie GerionLannister in strength. GerionLannister could get even stronger by, you know, building a unit with Barbarossa or building abundant circuses, but doing that would delay their economy even further. So at least it would maybe impel them to do that, or if they choose not to, that would mean that after GerionLannister's turn, I would be strongest. The Happy Face, as we can see after I play it, is also going to be relevant. Because I ended up passing up on all the age 1 Happy Face buildings, if I did not play the Theocracy, then even after I increase my population again, both of these citizens would be unhappy after the age ends. However, by playing the Theocracy, and after I presumably win the historic territory, then I will have 3 happy faces, meaning that it would be much longer before I will have to put any more of my population into happy face buildings or leave them unhappy. Not the end of the world if I leave population unhappy because of because I drew Rebellion and discarded it, so it's the Rebellion isn't going to be in the deck. But it's still, you know, having extra workers to put into stuff is always better than not having them for obvious reasons. So for all of those 3 major reasons, I think the Theocracy is actually pretty good for me here, even though it still only leaves me with 4 civil actions. As for the other things to do, I did want to take the irrigation with Machu Picchu. You know, even late irrigation with Machu Picchu are still fine, obviously. And with my final civil action, I finished upgrading my mine. I could have maybe not upgraded the mine with the intent of potentially destroying that bronze mine in the future and just relying on Machu Picchu and maybe Suez for my rock income. But I think that's probably getting a bit too cute at this stage, especially with me having irrigation in Machu Picchu. I wasn't necessarily expecting to have significant population needs. I'm, you know, doing pretty well in that front right now regardless. So yeah, I didn't really see the need to do that. I could have maybe built another warrior here, but at this point I was a little worried about the main weakness of Genghis, in my opinion, is when you have heavy cavalry with him, he's quite strong, but then when he leaves play, you're stuck on the heavy cavalry tactic with infantry, and that can be difficult. So I think when you have Genghis, it is kind of important to like plan for that transition and plan for when you replace him. So instead of being a 4th warrior, which yes, would let me be strongest in GerionLannister's turn, but I also know, I think I do know both of these events in the deck right now. They're both mine. One of them is the historic territory. The other is the Dark Ages. So neither of them are strength events. So there's actually no reason to be stronger than GerionLannister on their turn. In fact, I kind of wanted them to seed probably, just to get the Dark Ages out earlier. So for that reason, there wasn't a need to build a 4th warrior, and I just felt that I kind of wanted to set up to potentially put my population into knights instead of warriors for, like I said, when I have to replace Genghis. So I think that's the major reason I didn't build one. In retrospect, though, I think I should have, because since I expect to win the historic territory, I'm not gonna have the science to play knights next turn, so I'm gonna have to build a warrior next turn no matter what. So I might as well just do that now and use the military action in Age 1. So I think that was definitely a mistake, in retrospect. I draw a wealthy territory, a legion, and I redraw the heavy cavalry. Age 2 begins. My costless draws are 2 aggressions, a spy, and a plunder, as well as another bonus card. Gerion does not seed after all. Instead, they upgrade 2 mines and take a frugality. Frugality is kind of awkward. So the frugality is useful because Gerion will have to increase the population normally in order not to be an uprising. So by using the frugality with that, they will then be able to use Barbarossa's ability. Phalanxx Seeds reveals that historic territory. I am able to win it with my colonization bonus for only 1 warrior, which is nice. And Phalanx does that play I mentioned previously, where I guess they don't actually have to play the reserves, but that was because... Was that because an event was revealed? Oh no, it was because of the pact I had with them. Okay, so they didn't actually need to take the reserves to do this play. I was wrong in what I said last turn. So I guess they just took it because they preferred it over the other cards that were on the row. Anyway, they also take the drama, maybe just preferring it again to the other cards of the row, maybe setting up for a Shakespeare or Bach game. And they adopt the Legion tactic instead of the fighting band because they have the military actions to do that while still drawing 3 cards. pv4 finishes the Silk Road and finishes upgrading their mines. Strong turn. There's no reason not to seed that card. That was the wealthy territory, I think. because I know this is the Dark Ages, which hits Phalanxx in pv4 for a decent amount. So yeah, I rebuild my warrior. Like I said, I should have done that last turn, but oh well. As for what else to do, one option, so I, unfortunately, after rebuilding the warrior, that does mean that I'm 1 rock short of finishing the Machu Picchu. Now, I could have, this turn, perhaps, built 2 stages of the Machu Picchu, and then taken the Knights and the Engineering Genius. I think that definitely would be a defensible play. However, with the Cavalryman already being on the row, even though it's 1 civil action more, I thought it was better enough than the Knights to still be worth taking. Again, Age 2 military techs are significantly better than Age 1 military techs because you can use them with Age 3 tactics. So even though it costs 1 civil action more, I felt that the card was so much more powerful it was worth paying that price. Especially since I didn't feel I was losing too much by doing that, I still take the Engineering Genius. This may be... Now I'm questioning this Engineering Genius. I mean, it feels so strong, right? You take a powerful card. It's a powerful card to take for 1 civil action. I'll be able to use it immediately next turn. But I'm having so much rocks. I'm gonna have 14 rocks next turn. I can get out of corruption by increasing my population, by the way, so that's not a concern. But I'm gonna have 14 rocks next turn, so I can easily finish the Machu Picchu without it, and then I'll have a ton of rock income from the Machu Picchu. So maybe this Engineering Genius, even though normally it's like a no-brainer, I think that's why that's why I took it. I actually think in retrospect it was a mistake to take this Engineering Genius. I think in my situation with me having so many rocks and only 4 civil actions, the civil action is actually worth more to me than the 3 rocks is. And I should have just built the first stage of Machu Picchu instead. Anyway, as for which cards to keep, I think, you know, the one option is to keep all my bonus cards, but I felt that with me having 3 colonization bonus, maybe I didn't necessarily need all of these bonus cards. And so I decided to keep one of my aggressions instead, the Spy, which is the stronger one, just in case one of my opponents got greedy, you know, and I was able to maybe get stronger by building a cavalryman and stuff. Maybe I would be able to catch an opponent off guard with the Spy. Maybe though it would have been better to keep the bonus card. Because maybe it's unlikely my opponents will be vulnerable to a Spy. I draw a Terrorism, which I am definitely not going to cede, as well as Raid. I guess it's already... Okay, it's early enough in the Age 2, we can take a quick look at everyone's relative positions, even though I've taken one of my turns already. So we can see, due to Genghis Khan, I have a pretty significant culture leads over my opponent, without really having to sacrifice much in economy, other than my civil actions, which I'll get to. So this is also, I think, a definite strength of Genghis Khan, puts you in a nice position going into Age 3 culture-wise. As for science, we can see, obviously, Phalanxx with both the Universitas and Leonardo has a huge science advantage over our opponents. pv4 also has a decent amount with the Silk Road. And the library. I definitely have an advantage over my opponents in the rock situation, though, especially with my Machu Picchu. I'm also going to have an advantage over them in food production, probably, once they finish Machu Picchu and maybe get some irrigations going. However, so I would say that I like my position in terms of, obviously, culture. I think my economy is at least on par with my opponents, if not, probably not superior to them, just because I'm missing my science income, but it's at least on par with them. And obviously, I am tied with GerionLannister for strongest. So all of those are very nice qualities of my position. However, I am definitely suffering in the civil action department, with me only having 4 civil actions still, and with my limited science income, it might be a while before I can get more civil actions than this. So that's definitely my biggest weakness. GerionLannister has even more of a weakness there because they don't have any additional civil or military actions whatsoever. So, however, they are at least competing with strength for me, but I do feel that GerionLannister doesn't really have the best economy. I think GerionLannister is worse than me in economy, without really much to gain. Yeah, I think GerionLannister, having sacrificed getting civil military actions, I don't think got that much out of doing it. So while I didn't notice GerionLannister making any big mistakes in Age 1, I feel that ending Age 1 in this sort of position, like I said, especially with the civil and military actions, does feel pretty bad. Phalanx, like I said, major advantage is their science situation, but they are gonna be the player who has to get Coles and selective breedings going, and there's no James Watt in this deck. However, Leonardo will make it easier to get Coles going, so I think Phalanx is in a pretty good position right now. They also have the best civil and military actions among other players. pv4 is also pretty good in civil and military actions. Right now they're the weakest though, because Phalanx and GerionLannister both have H1 military techs, and obviously I have my strength helps, so pv4 is probably going to have to survive being the weakest for a little while, but if they can't, and they're only on 2 mines notably, so pv4 definitely has some notable weaknesses in their position. They do have the Silk Road though, at least. So I would say that at this point I felt like I was probably in the strongest position of my opponents. Obviously I still have weaknesses on my science and my civil actions, but everyone has weaknesses, and I felt that my strengths, I kind of had more strengths than my opponents do. But it's obviously nowhere close to like a dominating position or anything like that. I think GerionLannister is probably in the weakest position, but there's still plenty of game left to play, obviously. Anyway, GerionLannister sees revealing a wealthy territory. It was kind of unfortunate that, you know, it's revealed immediately after my turn ends, but that's the way it goes sometimes. I am at least still able to win it, even though it costs more than the previous colony did. I'm still only able to win it for 1 warrior and 1 bonus card. GerionLannister, after increasing the population with frugality, is able to build a 3rd knight, like mentioned before, so they're able to now be strongest even after I rebuild my warrior. And they also build up bread and circuses to get even stronger, and also to avoid a potential rebellion that, from their perspective, could be in the deck. And with the final civil action takes the reserves. Not the most exciting card, obviously, to take, but I guess they valued it over the irrigation. I mean, you know, I already got the first copy of irrigation, so it is true that GerionLannister should certainly be able to get a selective breeding, maybe even the first selective breeding, since I probably won't take it and I play before GerionLannister. So I think it does make sense, even though taking this with 4 civil actions is not a great place to be. Phalanx doesn't see it. Instead, they take an architecture. They definitely have the science for it. They're able to save a rock from it immediately, and they also take the cannons for 2 civil actions. This seems like a good turn. pv4 takes the rifleman for 3 civil actions, a heavy cost, but it's definitely an extremely important technology for them, so I think that's very understandable. By upgrading 1 warrior to rifleman, they're at least able to keep in strength a little bit. They're able to threaten defending 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, if they hadn't done that, by doing this, they're able to threaten defending an aggression from GerionLannister with only 1 bonus card from Age 2. I don't see it because I'm weakest, and also because I don't want the terrorism in the deck. Instead, I rebuild my warrior to compete in strength again. And this was another opportunity to finish my Machu Picchu, but instead I thought that it was more important to take the scientific method. One of the two biggest weaknesses in my position right now is my science income, and so getting a relatively early scientific method going felt pretty important to me. My original plan before the scientific method appeared was actually to play the cavalryman and build a cavalryman instead of the warrior, again to slowly transition into cavalryman for when I lose Genghis Khan. But again, I felt that it was more important to get my science income going earlier. I discard the less useful aggression, draw a classic army into vast territory. Those are definitely good draws. GerionLannister Siege reveals my rats. At the end of the day, though, everyone prepared for the rats well, so it didn't really have much of an impact this game. Gerion spends a fair amount of civil actions on the Harvard College, but I think that's understandable because they really need the science, especially for government form. This navigation, though, I am more skeptical of. This efficient upgrade they would be able to use directly next turn on their mine, or potentially their alchemy. That seems pretty strong to me. I think even with the Harvard College, they're going to be struggling in science because they really need a government form soon. So it looks like it'll be a long time before they're able to play this navigation. I don't think they can afford to play it next turn. So I'm a little skeptical about taking this. Maybe they seeded a colony, or maybe they have a strong colony in their hand. They want to win with it, though. But even then, with me having three colonization bonus too, and being on more military actions, it would be difficult for GerionLannister to win a colony from me even with it. Anyway, Phalanxx decides to take Bach for 3 civil actions. Definitely an expensive card to take. I mean, they have the drama from him already, so I can understand wanting him. But on the other hand, none of the other players are at all set up for Bach. There's no opera on the row yet. Maybe an opera will be revealed in the row, but that would still be expensive to take Bach and like a 3 civil action opera or something. So I think maybe Phalanxx could have waited a turn to take Bach and expected him to wheel back for 1 civil action next turn, and instead like taken like selective breeding and maybe stuff like that. I mean, it's true that they already take the cannon, and so they don't need so maybe without needing one of these cannons, they don't necessarily want to take the other cards in the row. But I think maybe, let's see, take selective breeding, play it, upgrade 1. That's 1, 2, 3. Take the efficient upgrade, and then play the reserves. That's 5 civil actions. And then maybe taking Catherine just as like a pretty good leader. Or actually, if they take Catherine, they can't take Bach, sorry. So they would have had 1 civil action left in that scenario, and they would be 1 rock short of upgrading their second farm. So I guess in that sense, they maybe would have like floated a civil action instead if they hadn't taken Bach. But also I think Catherine maybe, well, I guess they don't really need the military action from Catherine, so yeah, I don't know. I can understand that perspective if they felt that they didn't have a better turn, but it's still, this feels pretty expensive to me. They do still take the selective breeding and the efficient upgrade though. And then after electing Bach, which this I also question, because all electing Bach this turn does is get them 2 extra culture and lets them play the drama this turn. They could have very easily just played the selective breeding this turn, kept Leonardo around another turn to get a few more rocks. Actually, wait. Right, so because of Leonardo, right? So what they could have done is they could have taken these 2 cards, played selective breeding, played reserves, and upgraded 2 selective breedings, right? Because they would have had 8 rocks after doing all of that. So that would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so that would have used all 6 of their civil actions. That would have gotten them 2 farm upgrades, and then they almost certainly would have been able to get Bach for 1 civil action next turn. So yeah, I think that not taking Bach this turn and instead upgrading the selective breedings would have been a much better turn for Phalanxx. Anyway, pv4 offers the international trade agreement. Sadly, not to me. They offer it to GerionLannister, who accepts. pv4 takes a cannon and selective breeding of their own, as well as a scientific method. These are all cards that they kind of need. So even though it's a lot of text to take, I think that does make a lot of sense. And as like the reserves, taking advantage of this library, they can't play any of these texts except the theology, which they presumably want to play these before the theology, so that's understandable. So instead they take advantage of the extra hand space with library to take those reserves instead. A little bit of an expensive reserves, but if they didn't want to play this, they didn't, they could have played those reserves, but then not done anything else with the last civil action. So that does make sense. And they upgrade 2 warriors to riflemen to compete in strength more. I decide to finally finish my Machu Picchu this turn. That does cost me something, so we can see from 2 turns ago. Remember, 2 turns ago, I took the engineering genius instead of building 1 stage for my Machu Picchu. And as a result of that, now on this turn, I could have finished the Machu Picchu in 2 civil actions if I hadn't taken the engineering genius. But instead, since I did take it, I only have 1 civil action left. And the problem with that is there's 2 things. Well, there's actually 3 things I want to do with my civil actions, right? I want to take James Cook, obviously, with the Suez being in the row right now. Because the Suez is on the row, by the way, that's why I wanted to finish the Machu Picchu this turn, and so that I could be able to have the most civil actions possible when I take the Suez Canal next turn. Hopefully none of my opponents take it. With my vast territory in hand, I definitely want this. Now, because I'm planning to gain the Suez Canal, that just makes James Cook even more powerful, but there are 2 other things I would really like. First is the justice system, obviously, with me being on theocracy. getting this 5th civil action from the justice system would be extremely valuable to me. And also, obviously, upgrading my 2nd lab to get more science income going. So, if I hadn't taken the engineering genius last turn, this turn I could have done 2 of those things instead of only 1. And with me only being able to do 1, I decided that taking James Cook was the most important of those 3. He just seems by far the best leader for me. He will be able to, once I get the Suez, obviously, you know, let me win colonies easier, get a really big Suez going, get more culture with him. Just an extremely strong combo for obvious reasons. It felt more important to me to get him than to upgrade my 2nd lab. Also, if I don't get him, Nobel and Newton are powerful leaders who will likely be picked by Phalanxx and, by Gerion and pv4. Phalanxx already has an H2 leader. And so if those 2 leaders are picked, I will be left only with Darwin, who I am not in a position to take. So if I don't take James Cook this turn, I will be kind of in danger once Genghis leaves of not having a good leader. So I definitely think I was right to take James Cook here. It's just a shame that I took that engineering genius 2 turns ago. If I hadn't taken it, I'm not sure if I would have taken the justice system or upgraded a lab. Probably, I guess, upgraded the lab and just planned on getting, you know, an H2 or H3 government. But that's still, obviously, an extra 2 science would have been really nice. I think an extra 2 science for me, because of all my rocks, an extra 2 science would definitely be worth significantly more than that engineering genius that I took, especially since that would say it's like 2 science plus a civil action versus 3 rocks. That's like not even comparable, right? So yeah, taking that engineering genius was, I think, a substantial mistake that I made. Anyway, I decide to, in terms of discarding, you know, like I said, there's no way I'm ever seeing that terrorism, so especially with me having the scientific method, so no reason to keep it. And I also discarded the aggression, which it looks like I probably won't have a chance to play. And I draw a developed territory. Definitely good to see this. Very strong colony, as well as a war on territory and a seedable event in the emigration. Gerion plays the reserves to get it out of their hands, so they're able to take both the selective breeding and the cannon. Unfortunately, that does mean they're forced to eat corruption, though. I think that... Let's see. Yeah, I mean, having 11 rocks and not being able to finish the Harvard College feels pretty bad. I'm not sure... I guess this is kind of like a punishment for having taken that reserves way back when, right? They never had a chance to play it, and now they had to play it to basically do, like, nothing much for them, so just to get the hand space. Also kind of punished for taking this navigation. I think Gerion just took too many cards that they didn't have a chance to play soon enough. Like... Taking a card, like this Alchemy too, has sat in the hand for a long time. Like, when you take cards and they just sit in your hand for a long time, that's usually a bad sign. Not always. You know, some cards you take for, like, insurance purposes and stuff. But most of the time, if a card's sitting in your hand for a long time, it's a bad sign. Anyway, Phalanx plays a cannon for a defensive army tactic to now actually become strongest, and upgrades 1 farm, as well as a temple to a theater for Bach, and after playing the reserves, is able to upgrade a 2nd farm. So while I disagree with Phalanx's previous turn, this turn is definitely extremely strong. As for pv4, they seed, reveal strategic territory. I think I seeded this, I'm not sure. Anyway, unfortunately I can't bid for it because I do not have a free population to replace it with if I lost a warrior to this. So instead I let my opponents bid for it. pv4 ended up winning it. At least they had to pay, you know, relatively substantial amount for it, I would say. Anyway, they play a reserves to get out of the hand and take Newton. Definitely a very strong leader for them, being able to get that bonus, now going up to 8 science production after the slab upgrade. That's very strong. They can play the theocracy. Again, I assume just to get it out of the hand. I mean, there wasn't necessarily a need to play it this turn. Yeah. But I guess I just want to get it out of the hand. And also finishes upgrading their warriors to riflemen. So my turn, I decided to cede the vast territory. Now, I think, in retrospect, that was probably a mistake. Because you'll notice that, I kind of would like to have a free population, right? Especially if I build on colonies, or maybe to put into cavalryman or something. And so, if I, obviously I take the Suez Canal, I think normally the developed territory is stronger than the developed territory 2 is stronger than the vast territory 2, because it's 2 yellow tokens is still a lot, and it gives you a lot of other benefits besides. However, in my situation, because I could really use another population next turn, and I have to spend 3 civil actions on my Suez Canal, so I'm not going to be able to upgrade an irrigation this turn. I just felt that, I think in retrospect, having the vast territory would let me guaranteed, well, not next turn, because next turn after finishing the Suez, I wouldn't have any civil actions left, so I wouldn't be able to increase my population anyway. Okay, yeah, that's true. So I guess maybe even in retrospect, the developed territories, but I also still need science pretty badly. I mean, I kind of need food too, but I also need science, and the developed territory is a very strong territory. In addition, even though I already have 3 blue tokens from this wealthy territory, every blue token I have in this game is going to be valuable because of how much rock income I'm going to have, and like how, we can see maybe, Machu Picchu ended up maybe not being that great for me because I'm kind of just stockpiling rocks here, and I'm having trouble being able to find use for them precisely because I'm only on 4 civil actions, right? So having this much rock income with only 4 civil actions maybe isn't that great because it's harder to find ways to spend those rocks. Anyway, yeah, but maybe because next turn, even if I finish the Suez Canal, I won't be able to increase my population. I guess it's fine to see the vast and, get developed with it, and then, the turn after that, maybe get irrigations going or something. But yeah, I am able at least to get out of corruption this turn by upgrading my second lab. I obviously want to keep my tactic, and I want to keep my developed territory for Suez, and I wanted to keep the seedable event, so I discarded the other 2 cards. I didn't seed because... Oh, I did seed them, right. Yeah. So I drew a crime wave, a scientific cooperation, and a freedom of movement. Obviously, scientific cooperation is the most notable of these cards. Can be a very strong card. Gerion Seeds reveals a scientific breakthrough. It's actually we can see pv4 upgraded the science just in time. Maybe this was seeded by pv4. This sadly helps Gerion the least. Gerion, unfortunately, Gerion played Nobel, so, if it had been revealed after they played Nobel, then they would have gotten an extra 2 science out of it, so definitely unfortunate timing for Gerion. Anyway, Gerion uses Barbarossa's ability, I think, 2 more times, yep, to get 2 cannons, and then finally replaces him with Nobel, going up to 23 strength. That's a lot. But at least the scientific breakthrough does let them play the navigation this turn, even though I think that even though I still think it's a lot of science to spend when they don't have a government form yet, it's at least, getting it this turn means they can compete more for colonies and stuff like that, so. And they take patriotism to help them with their military. Maybe, yeah, because we have nationalism, maybe unlikely they'll be able to play. Maybe urban growth could be considered instead, but it also looks like probably they can just finish the Harvard College and kind of survive off philosophies for a while, so it's not clear when they might use the urban growth. Even though they're only on 4 civil actions again, so a card like patriotism where you have to spend a civil action to play it are less appealing. Anyway, Phalanxx Seeds reveals my cultural influence, giving Phalanx the most culture. They take some yellow cards, build a second theater, and take the coal. Yeah, they were 1 rock short of upgrading the coal this turn. So, yeah, this is probably the best they could do. pv4 doesn't seed, but they are able to play the Republic this turn, going up to 8 civil actions with Newton. So pv4 now has a ton of civil actions to play with. Upgrades 2 farms, and takes a breakthrough and a wave of nationalism, and just takes a bunch of yellow cards, which they definitely have the leeway to with all of these civil actions. It's my turn. I don't seed. I'm weakest. Instead, and because I have a strong alternative, which is the Scientific Cooperation Pact, Definitely a very, a very powerful pact to do if you can. So I wanted to offer it to someone, especially since, as we can see, I can use it this turn to play the con one to fix my civil action situation. The question was who to offer it to. I definitely didn't want to offer it to pv4, with pv4 being on Newton and 8 science income, soon to be 10 probably. That was not going to work out well for me. So it's going to be either Gerion or Phalanxx, and I think the choice between them is also pretty straightforward, even though Gerion will have more science income after they finish the Harvard College. First of all, Phalanxx has 19 science stored up, while Gerion only has 5, which means that Phalanxx will be able to play a lot more text than Gerion can over the next few turns. And second of all, especially since Gerion still doesn't have the government form. So Gerion is going to have to save up a lot of science to play the government anyway, meaning that between Gerion and Phalanxx, I felt that Gerion is much less likely to be able to use the pact a lot. Maybe there was a chance that Gerion would refuse the pact, but I felt that especially with Gerion, having the Harvard College and having Nobel and, needing the government too, like, Gerion is in pretty severe need of science too. So I thought that it's still probably right of them to accept the pact. But anyway, that's good for me. I can now play the Conmon, like I said. I didn't want to exist only on 4 civil actions heading into age 3. I think that can get really dicey. So just fixing that right now seems strong. It does mean that I am not able to finish the Suez Canal this turn, but I have a ton of wax saved up anyway, so it doesn't necessarily need to. I do, however, want to have to play James Cook this turn because the age is about to end. Unfortunately, this does mean I need to do something about my military situation. Now, thankfully, there is a rifleman available for 1 civil action, so I can use that. However, what I do this turn, I think, is a mistake. So obviously, I have this classic army tactic in my hand, meaning I'm gonna want some cavalry with it too eventually. But what I decide to do is, after upgrading 2 warriors to rifleman, I actually play the cavalryman and then disband the warriors with a cavalryman. The plan again being to get a second cavalryman once I'm able to get a free population. There's a couple of issues with that plan though. First of all, obviously I don't have the free population yet. Even after I get the developed territory, the 2 yellow tokens will only replace what I lose to the end of the age. So this is one reason why, maybe it could have been hard to foresee this turn of events 2 turns ago when I decided whether to seed the developed or the vast, but maybe I could have foreseen it too. I mean, I am kind of short on population right now. But another huge issue with this play is it means it uses up on my civil actions, so I don't have any civil actions left to play this irrigation. Again, my spending a civil action on the engineering genius continues to come back to bite me. I was never able to have a free chance to play this irrigation, and now I'm going to lose it at the end of the age. Maybe not the hugest of deals. I'm going to have more yellow tokens to develop, and maybe if I win the vast, but still definitely not where you want to be. So I think that given that I already made the mistake of taking the engineering genius, I think I shouldn't have played this cavalryman this turn. I should have just upgraded all my infantrymen to riflemen and played the irrigation. But definitely we can see the weakness of Genghis Khan here, where it's going to be a little bit of a difficult transition for me over the next few turns. As for cards, I definitely needed to keep the developed territory in my tactics, so it's just a question of the other 3 cards. And I felt that Crime Wave definitely felt too risky to seed. Right now I'm the weakest, in fact. Immigration is a potential seed. I should have yellow tokens, but I felt that my opponents, pv4, it has the theology played, so I felt that probably my opponents would be able to get rid of the unhappy workers by the time the immigration is revealed. And furthermore, with me just having this lone temple, I felt that the freedom of movement could be a strong event for me to be able to get rid of this temple efficiently. So I decided to go ahead and keep that along. Well, actually, oh yeah, I can keep the crime wave too, because I have 4 military actions. I forgot. Yeah, maybe I should have kept the immigration instead of the crime wave, but I guess I felt that once I got this tactic going, I might be able to compete for first or second in terms of strength. GerionLannister has an aggression, unfortunately, so I was obviously vulnerable to an aggression from GerionLannister, but there wasn't really anything I could do about that. They did have an aggression, but thankfully they used it against pv4, not me. Next, Gerion takes the revolutionary idea. Even though, again, they're only on 4 civil actions, I think this is a strong card for them, so I can understand it. and they're still able to finish the Harvard College. I mean, maybe they didn't need it because they have the Harvard College giving them science anyway, but also they have the scientific cooperation pact with me, so... And it's probably, yeah, better than any of the other cards they could take in. Maybe architecture, but they didn't have the science for architecture this turn. Yeah, because of all the techs I played, so... with them wanting to finish the Harvard College this turn, the architecture wouldn't save them civil actions on it, so I think the rev idea makes sense. And they play a Napoleonic army tactic to go up to 35 strength. That's scary. However, because they're only on 2 military actions, it means they can't actually draw any cards this turn, which means everyone else is safe from aggressions and wars for at least 1 turn. From Gerion. Age 3 begins. Phalanxx offers a promise of military protection to get a little bit of extra strength to Gerion. Gerion accepts. I think that's a sensible move from both ends. Phalanxx plays an arena to fix their happy face situation. They could have potentially built a third temple, but that would mean their next population would not be happy. So this makes sense to me. It does mean, however, that they delay their coal upgrades, which is unfortunate. Instead, they spend their final civil action on this cavalryman, which is a good card for them, at least. pv4 seeds reveals Vast Territory 1. This was not seeded by me, probably seeded by Gerion, which is why they wanted the navigation. Anyway, Cook obviously helps me win this pretty well. I bid 8, which means I can win it by putting 1 unit, the bonus card, and 2 of my other cards. It was a little bit of a difficult question which cards to spend. I mean, I definitely wanted to keep the tactic in my developed territory for my Suez Canal. And one of the cards to spend was definitely the crime wave, so that wasn't hard. The question was which of these other 3 events to spend with Cook in order to win the colony. Like I said before, I felt the freedom of movement was potentially a very strong event for me, with me having that 1 temple. So I wanted to keep the freedom of movement for that reason. So it was really between the impact of agriculture and balance. Now, there is this mechanized agriculture on the row, but I will not be taking it next turn, almost certainly, because I'm going to be spending 4 civil actions to finish the Suez, and, you know, it probably would be available for like 2 civil actions, so I could potentially take it, but it felt like, you know, I don't want to say for sure, and I wasn't sure when I was going to upgrade it. So I kept the impact balance just because that's currently like a more even impact. However, looking at this game in retrospect, like, pv4 has Newton and Republic, right? They're going to be taking a lot of cards. Like, this is certainly going to be available for 2 civil actions. It might even be available for 1, depending on just how many cards pv4 takes, which, again, with Newton, you can always take tons of cards. And so, especially since I'm probably, you know, almost certainly going to want this mechanized agriculture. I mean, I guess I was also kind of thinking, like, maybe I'll win the Vast 2, and then, oh yeah, I guess I wanted to put away those 2 cards instead of the bonus card because, like, there's more colonies coming and stuff, and just the bonus card in general is more valuable than 2 other events, which I'm not sure I'll seed. Especially the crime wave, which I know I'm not going to seed. However, I think in retrospect, because I will, you know, so I think I was thinking, well, maybe I'll win the Vast 2, and then I can just subsist off of my Age A farms with the Machu Picchu. So I think that was kind of my logic in not taking the impact of balance. I mean, that was my logic in discarding the impact of agriculture instead of the impact of balance. But I think in retrospect, that doesn't make much sense, especially since I'm going to have so much rock income in coming turns after I finish the Suez. Like, I need something to spend those rocks on. If I don't have a lot of population to spend those rocks on, that might get difficult. So I actually think in retrospect, like, the mechanized agriculture, it's already on the row. Like, I should probably take it next turn anyway. And if I'm taking the mechanized agriculture, I definitely want the impact of agriculture, right? So I think in retrospect, I should have discarded either the impact of balance or the freedom of movement. I think you can make a case for either. But I think the impact of agriculture is probably the best of the 3 in retrospect. Anyway, pv4 plays the strategy, even though they already had the warfare. 4 military actions is still substantially better than 3, and they definitely have the science for it. They also built a temple, I think, to get out of corruption. Take an architect, and then take an architecture along with some yellow cards. Notably, they don't upgrade their lab yet. Maybe they felt they didn't have to. They have so much science income. Maybe they were thinking, I want to destroy this lab at some point, perhaps, to get more population in the military. Anyway, I felt that I had waited too long to finish the Suez Canal. Well, not too long, but like, you know, winning one more turn did feel too long. However, finishing it does cost me a fairly substantial amount, because you'll notice that the first copy of Air Forces is on the row. And, you know, again, that one extra civil action I spent on that engineering genius continues to come back to bite me. I am one civil action short of finishing the Suez Canal and taking the Air Forces. So I have to pick between them. And I just felt that, you know, I'm going to be getting 4 extra rock income with the Suez Canal finishing it this turn, right? So that just felt like too good to pass up, basically. This is only the first copy of Air Forces, and I mean, you know, not thinking the first copy, you always risk being the one without Air Forces. But, however, I'm going to be having so many rocks that I can also probably survive without Air Forces in this game. And I mean, I forgot to show the state of the at the beginning of Age 3. Let me do that right now real quick. So we can see culture-wise, Phalanxx is now in the lead with Bach, but I'm still keeping pace thanks to the combination of Genghis and James Cook. pv4 is also keeping pace thanks to Silk Road and their temples. GerionLannister is behind in culture. At least GerionLannister is pretty good in science, although even there, pv4 is ahead. The rock situation, especially after I finish my Suez, I am by far in the lead in terms of rock production. Food production is a bit of an issue for me, though. At least I managed to somewhat pretty much fix my civil and military action situation with that Kanman. However, I am definitely really suffering from strength right now. I will at least be able to get the classic army tactic going this turn to fix my strength situation a little bit. As for GerionLannister, like I said, their economy is, I mean, not great. They only have 5 rock income. They haven't upgraded the farms yet. They do at least have a pretty good amount of science income with the Harvard College. However, and I think this turn they'll at least be able to get a government form finally. But they were without a government form for a long time. So the economy is in a pretty rough position right now. However, they are compensating for that by being by far the strength leader, at least at the present moment in time. So I think if Gerion is going to win this game, they need to really leverage their strength in the coming turns. Unfortunately, as we said previously, they don't have any cards in their hand currently. So only being on 2 military actions for the entirety of Age 2 has really hurt them in terms of being able to pressure military quickly. So yeah, definitely staying on Despotism 4-2 for all of Ages 1 and 2 has hurt Gerion significantly. And I think even though they're in the strength lead, their position is probably worse right now. Phalanx, again, with Bach, is doing well in terms of culture. However, they don't have a really substantial lead at all over their opponents. They were forced to delay their coal upgrades until the beginning of Age 3, which is not anywhere you want to be. However, at least they'll be able to get their coal upgrades going this turn. And once they do, their economy will be in pretty decent shape. The strength is also pretty decent. So I'd say Phalanx is doing pretty well right now. I think their issue is just they're not really doing that well in any one particular area, not even culture, frankly. So they're going to have to find some way to really jumpstart their civilization somehow, whether in terms of strength or in terms of more culture or maybe computers or something. They're going to need to find something, because right now I think they're not particularly strong in any area, unlike me, where I have this huge advantage in rank income, and pv4, who has a huge advantage not only in science income, but also in civil actions. Having the Republic having 8 civil actions and Isaac Newton, pv4 is able to do a ton of stuff on their turn, which is definitely a huge advantage pv4 has over their competition. Probably pv4's biggest disadvantage is only being on 5 rock income, because they had to destroy their 3rd mine way back when. However, thanks to Silk Road and all their civil actions, that's not even really an issue for pv4 right now, I would say, because they're able to supplement this by getting a whole bunch of yellow cards. So I would say that pv4 played Age 2 really well, and definitely I would say, I mean, you know, I do have the advantage with my rock income, so I can't say that pv4 is like definitively doing the best right now, but I think that, yeah, this 8 civil actions, Newton, Silk Road, this is just a really strong combo in general. So Definitely pv4 showing why they're such a strong player, I think, in this game, the way they play that H2. But, you know, it's definitely, the game was nowhere near over, and I have my advantage with my Suez Canal and my James Cook, so it's just a question of if I can ride that to victory now. Anyway, since I can't take the air forces, and I guess another reason, you know, another reason I did this is because it leaves me with just enough civil actions to get my tactic going here, which was me at 23 strength. Obviously, I'm vulnerable to an aggression. I would be vulnerable to an aggression from Gerion if they had a card in their hand. So, and that puts me ahead in strength of Phalanx and pv4. So even though I lose I don't take the air forces, I still think this is the right turn in retrospect. And I draw an impact of strength. Oh, and I think I didn't seed, right? Yeah, I didn't seed because I was weakest, and my turn makes me not weakest. Anyway, Gerion finally gets a government form going with the Kanman, and they do take that first copy of air forces, understandably, and then increase the population to get out of corruption. They don't upgrade. I agree with not upgrading this mine. I think at this point in the game, there's no real reason to, and they would be better served by destroying this mine and putting the population somewhere else, probably in military, because that's their strength right now. Phalanx Seeds reveals a good harvest, which unfortunately helps me the least along with Gerion. Phalanx is able to upgrade a coal mine. They are unfortunately one rock short of upgrading the second, but they are able to get the second copy of Air Forces at least. pv4 doesn't seed. Instead, they spend, after upgrading their second lab, they play, and the temple, they're able to build 2 cannons with the Wave of Nationalism and play a positional army. So pv4, you know, definitely got a good tactic with the positional army that they were able to immediately use to now go up all the way up to 32 strength, being safe from an aggression from GerionLannister, and even potentially threatening their opponents. So that's definitely very strong from pv4. With the rest of their turn, they just take yellow cards. It's my turn. I'm not weakest, so I decided to go ahead and seed that freedom of movement. Reveal popularization of science. This is actually a pretty high science game, so everyone benefits from this a fair amount, though pv4 benefits the most. Now, even though I just got my, I got my classic army tactic, but that was before pv4 played the positional army. Positional army looks a lot better. I am able to get a positional army myself with the rockets, so that's why I took the rockets, planning to copy pv4's tactic next turn. In order to do that, I do have to build at least 1 rockets this turn, but that's also something I want to do anyway because it protects me from potential aggressions from Gerion. I also like the revolutionary idea. Maybe I don't necessarily need it, but I do have this scientific cooperation pact with Gerion, and I think I didn't necessarily see a better use for that, especially since, yeah, I decided to take that mechanized agricultural. After all, I really want additional pop, especially with my rock income, but I am unfortunately 1 rock short of upgrading the farm this turn, so if I didn't take the revolutionary idea, there wasn't, I definitely wanted to take the mech ag, then I would have 2 civil actions left. I didn't really want any of these cards. I mean, maybe I could have taken the movies, though, just as a way to spend my rocks to get some more culture going. So one alternative to this could have certainly been to take the movies and not play the mechanized agriculture this turn. I guess the movies, felt kind of greedy to me, potentially. But, I think actually in my position, they're definitely not greedy, right? Because of all the rocks I have. So I actually think in retrospect, I maybe should have taken the movies here. Although, on the other hand, I mean, my next pop is definitely going into my military, so I wouldn't be able to build the movies next turn. Maybe in 2 turns, but, maybe not. Maybe I would want to put more into the military or something, so it's a close call. The revolution idea, I mean, the revolution idea is such a strong card for 1 civil action, right? It's, like, really hard to pass this up for 1 civil action. So I think this is definitely a defensible play on my end. Maybe it's probably right, even. Anyway, I take an Impact of Wonders, I draw an Impact of Wonders, an Impact of Technology, and another bonus card. Gerion offers me a military alliance. I was happy to accept. Gerion takes Pierre, good leader, and a tanks. Finally is able to upgrade their farms, and that's it. Phalanx Seeds, even though they're weakest, reveals wealthy territory. You know, definitely wanted to win it, especially for only 7. I especially wanted to win it because I don't want these cavalryman anymore. So I am able to win it just with a cavalryman, my 3 bonus, and by discarding one of these, I end up discarding. Let's see, I had balance, strength, wonders, and technology. So I got rid of strength. Yeah, strength is definitely a little bit of a it's definitely a risky impact here, right? Because like who knows what the strength situation is going to look like at the end of the game. Balance, especially with me being able to upgrade farms, felt good. Wonders will at least be yeah, wonders is also a positive impact for me. And technology, especially with the revolutionary idea and my scientific cooperation, felt like this could was also probably going to be a good impact for me. So these definitely feel a lot safer than the impact of strength would have been. Anyway, Phalanx takes Marlena. Definitely a strong leader for them. However, I would be remiss not to note that there's Bill Gates and computers on the row. It's still early into age 3. And early Bill Gates computers is probably the strongest thing you can possibly do in age 3. So I think Phalanx should have at least heavily considered that. Even though certainly Marlena is a very strong leader for them as well. Anyway, they built a swordsman and able to get 2 tactics going with Marlena, as well as upgrading their mine. So Marlena definitely paying off for them, currently at least. And they take an efficient upgrade. But yeah, I should mention that I was comfortable losing this cavalryman because since I have 2 bonus cards, I am completely safe from an aggression from pv4. Anyway, Phalanx takes an efficient upgrade for that final mine. I mean, you know, maybe like it's not worth it to upgrade this at this point, and they would rather have this population free to go into other things. But with the efficient upgrade, they'll be able to upgrade it for only 2 rocks, so it'll pay off for it immediately. So I guess, yeah, with the efficient upgrade, and maybe they don't, I guess they don't want, yeah, none of these cards. Maybe they could have taken the movies, but with Marlena, dramas are good, so yeah, I understand. pv4, though, declares a war on Phalanx by taking the last copy of Air Forces. So indeed, I am the player left without Air Forces. That was a risk when I didn't take it when it's available on my turn. But again, because I have so many rocks, I think I'm pretty safe from wars. And we can even see pv4 doesn't declare war against me because I could build 2 rockets and copy the positional army. Instead, after building an Air Force, and then pv4 does not pass up on Bill Gates computers, which I think they definitely shouldn't. And then takes the Mechag 2. We can see they're at 49 strength. Phalanx's strength is easy to calculate. They can only really build an Air Force, which gives them an extra 11 strength to go up to 41. There's not really going to be able to get much more than that. So yeah, this war is almost certainly safe. It does, however, cost pv4 3 military actions, which is pretty substantial. So it's not a huge war. Maybe it's not worth giving up 3 military actions. Maybe it is, though. I mean, Phalanx is kind of... I mean, they're not really winning a culture, but they're a little bit ahead of pv4 in culture. And it at least forces Phalanx to build the Air Force instead of doing something else with their turn. Anyway, I see that's the impact of wonders. Safe impact for me. A real vast territory. I didn't want to bid too much on this because with me now having Mechags going, it didn't feel like a... really an important territory for me at this point. And I couldn't put too much into it because I, you know, needed to, you know, get the positional army and stuff like that. Anyway, I didn't really want it that much. GerionLannister ends up winning it for 2 units. Didn't feel too bad about that. I did want to take the fast food chains with, me getting the Mechags going soon. This feels like potentially quite a strong wonder for me. And also the other wonders, I mean, space flight would be the strongest wonder for me, probably, but also, like, all of my opponents are probably gonna want spaceflight too, so that's gonna be a contested wonder. The fast food chains is available for me right now, and I think I'm not giving up too much to take at this turn anyway, because the only other things I really want to do in my turn are, well, like I said, build the rockets and copy the positional army, thus putting me up to 37 strength. Using up military actions, but I think it's worth it. I really want the positional army tactic going, and then just upgrading 1 farm. Taking the fast food chains does mean I pass up on upgrading a second farm, but I don't really... I'm gonna, I think, be able to pop twice even without it. And I didn't want any of these other cards, so... I mean, the reserves is always nice, but I'm also only... 6 civil actions isn't that much in age 3, so... yeah, I think the fast food chains just... Knowing that I will have a good wonder that... and not worrying about, like, my opponents taking the space flight, or... You know, the Manhattan Project would also probably be alright, but, my opponent, that also seems like it'll be a contested wonder, so... I think this was the right play in retrospect. I draw a war. Unfortunately, I probably won't have the military actions to get a big war going without me having air forces. Gerion takes the computers, good card, and reserves, elects Pierre, and is able to rebuild the cannon to go back up to 34 strength. Phalanxx does what we said previously and builds an air forces. Unfortunately, that means they can't upgrade their coal, but they are at least able to get a military theory to go up to 45 strength, so it won't be a very big war at least. And they take some technologies. This democracy, I think, is optimistic, but the tanks I definitely understand. Although, I mean, you know, I guess it depends if they have a tactic for the tanks in their hand. Like, ideally, I think they would have tried to get a modern infantry and copied pv4's positional army, but they weren't able to get the first copy of modern infantry, so... It ends up being a 9-point war, so pv4 gets an 18-point swing against Phalanx, so not a huge war, but again, it at least interrupted Phalanx's economic development. pv4 decides to cede, reveals an inhabited territory. This one I definitely wanted more than the vast. I think the inhabited territory 2 is better than the vast territory 2. I'm able to win it. I was willing to send away my bonus card because I'm not going to need it to defend. pv4 builds a 3rd temple and upgrades some computers with Bill Gates, obviously strong, and takes the Manhattan Project wonder. Strong wonder for them with the computers, getting more strength with it. Definitely looks like a strong turn. As for my turn, I see the impact of balance. You know, definitely seems like a relatively safe seed for me, although maybe not as safe as I might think. I'm gonna, after I lose Cook, I'm gonna need a source of culture production for that to be a good impact for me. I reveal my freedom of movement that I'm able to use to get rid of this temple. I decide to send it into rockets to let me give a bit of strength. Unfortunately, I'm 1 strength short of being able to defend against an aggression from pv4, so I need to find a way to fix that. But first, I decide to take my replacement leader, who is Einstein. I mean, I was a little, I think, concerned about an iconoclasm. Yeah, because I hadn't seen the iconoclasm. My opponents all replaced their leaders. So, because I thought that an iconoclasm seemed plausible, I kind of wanted to replace Cook this turn. Well, I had a good leader, replace him with Einstein. Einstein is not perfect for me, because I'm only on scientific methods, but he's still a great leader. And probably the best one. I mean, Churchill would be fine. Marie would be alright. But I do think Einstein is the best remaining leader for me, especially with me having the impact of technology. So I decided to go ahead and play him this turn. I'm also able to play a civil service this turn, which definitely improves my situation by quite a bit. So that was good. The question was what else to do. And I decided to take the pro sports. I think this time I definitely should have taken the movies. I feel that I was maybe... I think I was too scared of, like, a war from pv4 Phalanx or someone. But, like, with me having so many rocks, with me having this positional army, like... I think a war is just not... As long as I, like, make sure I'm not vulnerable, which shouldn't be too difficult, a war seems like it would be pretty hard to get against me. I have enough science, so instead of taking this with 3 civil actions, I could have taken the movies, played the movies, built the movies, you know, and built, like, a rifleman so I'm not vulnerable to an aggression. I think that would have been better than what I ended up doing, which is just playing the pro sports and then building a rifleman and the rockets. This, I'm not sure why I built the rockets too. I guess I just felt that it was better than anything else, but yeah, I think in retrospect, like, this population of the rockets should have gone into movies instead. I have so many rocks, I can definitely afford building more movies, and, you know, just at this point, like, you know, with age 3 about to end, I mean, I think I was too scared of a war, and I was definitely in a position here to instead just push culture hard instead with movies, especially with me having built that, having seeded that impact of balance. I think another reason I didn't like the movies is because I preferred to have multimedias with Einstein, but I think with the age about to end, that doesn't really matter. I needed to just push culture right now. So yeah, I definitely should have built at least one movie this turn. Anyway, I draw an impact of progress and an armed intervention. Gerion offers me an international tourism, but I refuse. I thought the strength just felt more important to me right now. You know, obviously the pack benefits Gerion. I mean, Gerion, maybe I'm not worried about potentially beating me, but I still just felt that the strength was more important. Though again, especially because of the impact of balance, yeah. Again, I think I was just too scared of potential wars, and I didn't have to be. So yeah, I should have accepted this pact. Yeah, sorry, Gerion. Anyway, Gerion takes the space flight, and builds another arena. Phalanx Seeds reveals an arms industry. This, at least, is a really good event for me. Though maybe you could say I don't really need that many rocks. Phalanx places satellites, builds another theater, and takes the reserves. They are now strongest. pv4 Seeds reveals an economic progress, so I get even more rocks. We can see that even though I have so many blue tokens, I have an extra 4, 6, 9, 8. I have an extra 11 blue tokens. I have all of them. They're all gone. They're all gone. That, this is definitely not something you see every day. That's really funny. Anyway, pv4 takes the movies that I didn't take and builds one of them, as well as finishing the Manhattan Project to tie Phalanx and Strength, and takes some yellow cards. I seed, reveal a Ravages of Time. This is a fine event for me, because the Colossus wasn't doing much for me anymore anyway. I get that multimedia. I wanted to, you know, get that cultural production going for sure. Although again, I should have done that last turn with movies, but oh well. And I decide it was important to build this 4th Rifleman, you know, getting stronger than my opponents. I mean, I did discard that impact of strength, but this does get me out of corruption, and so it's probably something I wanted to do anyway. I have, you know, I still be able to draw 3 cards off of it, and it, you know, makes me safer from any potential, like, aggression shenanigans or anything like that. And again, it's just, it gets me out of corruption. Although maybe, yeah, I think I needed to do this to be safe from like a double aggression or something like that. And I took the oil mainly just to have a tech to play next turn, to get a Nobel Prize potentially. I draw, unfortunately, no impacts, just a peace treaty, war I won't be able to use, and a modern army. Guarantees reveals my impact of wonders. We can see that that is a positive impact for me by a little bit. Gerion plays the Air Force as the patriotism, builds an Air Force, and that's pretty much it. Phalanx Seeds reveals an impact of variety. This, unfortunately, is a bad impact for me. Phalanx and pv4 get more points off of it. All of my opponents get more points off of it than I do. Phalanx does take that the second copy of Modern Infantry that I mentioned earlier, as well as some yellow cards for the military while eating corruption. Probably didn't have much better to do. Age 4 begins. pv4 Seeds reveals an impact of competition. This, at least, is a good impact for me because of all those rockets I built. I get more points out of it than my opponents do. pv4 plays Democracy, builds another movies, and takes an Empire State Building. Unfortunately, looks like pv4 will be able to get 2 H3 wonders thanks to Bill Gates. And this Empire State Building, we can see pv4 is ahead in culture, science, probably will be able to get ahead in rocks, and maybe even food and strength. It's going to be a big wonder for pv4 for sure. I seed my impact of progress. It's going to be a good impact for me. Revealing an impact of science. I'm able to get second out of it, but pv4 gets first. I'm able to win the Nobel Prize. Well, I'm able to, yeah, I decide to, yeah, basically build some stuff so that I can, I build the arena instead of the multimedia, so that I can be better for potential impact of happiness. And I build this, rockets, so that, to give me an extra point for fast food chains without spending a civil action. Unfortunately, I am not able to win the Nobel Prize because I did not have enough civil actions to play the revolutionary idea while doing the other things I wanted to do on this turn. Oh yeah, and I played the military theory, obviously, because I ceded the impact of progress. Gerion offers the international tourism to pv4 this time, who accepts. Gerion is able to finish the space flight with an engineering genius that they can play this turn because of Harvard College, so that's good. Phalanx Seeds reveals my impact of balance. Unfortunately, this ended up being, well, not a bad impact for me, just kind of a mediocre one. Adopts the positional army, is able to get it going with the modern infantry and some more cannons. So Phalanx is able to be strongest now. Maybe that means they redrew the impact of strength that I discarded. And they take the pro sport. They take some cards. PV4 Seeds reveals my impact of technology. This we can see is a good impact for me. I am able to get either plus 12 or plus 8 over my opponents with it. And then PV4, after upgrading a farm and building another lab, they're able to have the highest science, culture, food, and resource production. So everything except strength, thus getting them 36 points off of the Empire State Building, which is definitely a lot. And so before the final impacts, we can take a look at the standings. Because of PV4 having a lot of culture production and being able to finish 2 H3 wonders, they are hugely in the culture lead, almost 50 points ahead of me. I at least seem to be pretty well solidly in second, being 30 points ahead of Phalanx, while Phalanx is 23 points ahead of Gerion. So it's probably likely it's going to end 1, 2, 3, 4, but especially, you know, PV4 I think is definitely going to finish first, whereas there could be a set of impacts in there that maybe is able to get Phalanx second, or that's able to get GerionLannister third or something like that. So we'll see what happens. First impact is the impact of architecture. This one is a bad one for me versus PV4, but I have no hope of catching up to PV4 anyway. It's at least good against Phalanx and Gerion. Second is the impact of culture. This is the worst possible impact on the deck for me because I am last in it. Next is the impact of population. This is I think actually, yeah, everyone gets 16 out of it, which is funny. Next is the impact of progress. That's the one that I seeded, so it's at least, you know, okay for me. Although not great. Next is the impact of happiness. So me building the arena was somewhat rewarded, but it's still not a good impact for me. But the last one is the impact of strength, as predicted, but at least I'm second in that, which means that Phalanx is not able to overtake me, and it indeed ends with PV4 being first by a very wide margin, exactly 80 points. But I at least am able, and second, and I am, let's see, that's 17 points ahead of Phalanx, so not actually that much ahead of Phalanx in retrospect. I guess I have two thoughts about this game. I think that, so when it comes to me, I think that even though my plays in Age 1 were, unorthodox in some ways, I actually think in retrospect, I really like how I played Age 1. And I think I feel more comfortable with the military strategy. I think pushing military so hard early worked well in disrupting my opponent's turns. And I think I got a fair amount out of it without spending too much. So I think my Age 1 way was pretty good. My Age 2 play, though, definitely left a lot to be desired. In particular, like I said, I think taking that Engineering Genius, even though normally that's a good play, I think in my position it was really bad. And like going through it, I could see like just how much I lost from taking that card. So I think that was a pretty significant mistake on my end. And I definitely made some other mistakes too that I mentioned. I think my other major mistake, aside from taking that engineering genius, was not taking the movies at some point. I think I was just sort of thinking too much like Einstein multimedia, and I think I was also just like freaked out about the military situation when I really did not have to be. I think in retrospect I was actually quite safe in terms of military, so I definitely had the capability to devote resources into movies. And not doing that was a mistake. So those, I think, I definitely made two pretty significant, like that one tactical mistake in taking the EG, and that one more strategic mistake in worrying about the military too much instead of trying to push culture by building movies. That being said, though, you know, pv4 won by 80 points, and, like, you know, pv4 getting Newton, Republic, Silk Road into, like, early Bill Gates computers, like, frankly, I'm not sure. Like, look, obviously pv4 played really well, and, you know, I'm not, like, pv4 played better than me, right? That's undeniable. I do wonder, though, even if I had played better, like, could I have beaten, like, this line pv4 was able to get of, like I said, Newton's Silk Road Republic into Bill Gates computers, like, getting these two wonders? Maybe I could have, maybe if I had played better, I could have found a way to interfere with pv4's turns more. I don't think, like, cutting Bill Gates, like, I could have taken Bill Gates for 3 civil actions, but I think that would have been just, like, really bad for me, especially I think I had, like, way better things to do that turn than, like, take Bill Gates for 3 civil actions with my scientific methods. I mean, maybe I should have done it, but, and maybe, I would have had more of a leeway to, like, take Bill Gates in that position if I had been more civil action efficient in H2. So that's definitely something I could consider. But I do think that, like, with pv4 playing so well throughout the entire game, and with getting this early Bill Gates computers, like, it's really hard, I think, to come back when that happens. So that's why I'm kind of 2 minds in this game, but, like, I guess when it comes to, like, my personal development, right, there's no point in, like, complaining about, like, oh, like, you know, they got Bill Gates computers. Like, that happens sometimes, right? What you can control is your own level of play. You can't control the luck in Through the Ages. There's definitely luck in Through the Ages, but you can't control it. What you can control is your own play. And I definitely made some significant mistakes this game. And while it is possible that maybe I couldn't have gotten first no matter how well I played, I still made mistakes that I can look back at and improve in the future. As for GerionLannister and Phalanxx, again, I think GerionLannister just being on Despotism, 4 civil actions, 2 military actions for the entirety of Ages 1 and 2, I think that just killed them in this game completely. And I think, you know, there's some other issues too with the economy, but I think all of their other issues derived from their civil and military action situation. As for Phalanxx, I think that Phalanxx doesn't have any obvious holes necessarily, but I do think that they didn't get their economy going quickly enough, especially these coals, right? Like, these really late coal upgrades felt bad, and I think that Phalanxx probably forced Bach too much. Well, I agree Bach was a good leader for them. I think they forced him too much, and you don't generally want to force things. I mean, sometimes you force things Through the Ages, so I don't want to say that, but, like, in a 4-player game, I think you usually don't want to force Bach, even though it is a good Bach game with Marlena as a follow-up, and with Phalanxx having the Jamas. I think that by focusing too much on, like, getting the Bach game going, I think Phalanxx left behind their economy, and then we saw what happened, where after pv4 got that war, Phalanxx just had to worry way too much about, like, potential future wars from pv4, or maybe even future wars from me, and they weren't able to build up their culture enough because they had to devote too many resources to the military when their economy wasn't able to support them getting both military and other ways of culture production. So that's sort of my judgment on this game. I think it was an interesting game overall, and like I said, I'm at least proud of the way I played Age 1. I like the way that I kind of forced James Cook Suez, but James Cook Suez is a powerful enough combination that it's worth forcing. And obviously, you know, Suez performed really well. Machu Picchu maybe didn't perform as well for me, but I'm also not sure. I also still think it was, like, a justifiable move for me to make on that turn. I don't think Machu Picchu is why I got second in this game. like one or the other. I think this ended up being just like an okay wonder for me, but like I had like I definitely needed a rock sink right in H2, like with all those turns I had so many rocks. So I needed a rock sink. It was the rock sink that was available, so I think it was like fine. Yeah. So aside from those 2 mistakes I pointed out, I think overall I'm pretty happy with how I played this game, and ended up and getting second against these strong players. It's definitely a respectable result. So congratulations to pv4, absolutely deserved win. We'll see if I can get first in the next round of the French Open. Until then, though, and until my next video, I do have more video ideas. So I'm planning on uploading another video in the next few days sometime. Until then, though, as always, if you have any comments or constructive criticism of either my gameplay or my video making, I'm looking to improve a lot in both areas. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.